everyone, this is Miss Ann, and welcome to another Monday book tasting. Today we are going to be reading Louisiana's Way Home by Kate DiCamillo. You might know Kate DiCamillo from some of her other books in our collection, including The Tale of Despero. So what is this book about? Well, here is the summary, the quick little summary of Louisiana's Way Home. Louisiana Elefante's granny wakes her up in the middle of the night and tells her that they need to leave home immediately. And this time Granny intends for them never to return. So we're going to read the first two chapters of Louisiana's Way Home. And then following this, if you like this book, I'll follow it up with some good read-alikes. This is considered a historical fiction. It takes place in the 1970s. Here we go. Louisiana's Way Home by Kate DiCamillo. Chapter 1. I am going to write it all down so that what happened to me will be known. So that if someone were to stand at their window at night and look up at the stars and think, my goodness, whatever happened to Louisiana Elefante? Where did she go? They will have an answer. They will know. This is what happened. I will begin at the beginning. The beginning is that my great-grandfather was a magician, and long, long ago he set into motion a most terrible curse. But right now, you do not need to know the details of the terrible curse. You only need to know that it exists and that it is a curse that has been passed down from generation to generation. It is, as I said, a terrible curse. And now it has landed upon my head. Keep that in mind. We left in the middle of the night. Granny woke me up. She said, the day of reckoning has arrived. The hour is close at hand. We must leave immediately. It was 3 a.m. We went out to the car, and the night was very dark, but the stars were shining brightly. Oh, there were so many stars, and I noticed that some of the stars had arranged themselves into a shape that looked very much like someone with a long nose telling a lie. The Pinocchio constellation. I pointed out the starry Pinocchio to Granny, but she was not at all interested. Hurry, hurry, said Granny. There's no time for stargazing. We have a date with destiny. So I got into the car, and we drove away. I did not think to look behind me. How could I have known that I was leaving for good? I thought that I was caught up in some middle-of-the-night idea of Granny's, and that when the sun came up, she would think better of the whole thing. This has happened before. Granny has many middle-of-the-night ideas. I fell asleep, and when I woke, we were still driving. The sun was coming up, and I saw a sign that said, Georgia, 20 miles. Georgia? We were about to change states, and Granny was still driving as fast as she could, leaning close to the windshield, because her eyesight is not very good and she is too vain to wear glasses, and also because she is very short, shorter almost than I am, and she has to lean close to reach the gas pedal. In any case, the sun was bright. It was lighting up in the splotches and stains on the windshield, and making them look like glow-in-the-dark stars that someone had pasted there as a surprise for me. I love stars. Oh, how I wish that someone had pasted glow-in-the-dark stars on our windshield. However, that was not the case. I said, Granny, when are we going to turn around and go back home? Granny said, we are never going to turn around, my darling. The time for turning around has ended. Why? I said. Because the hour of reckoning has arrived, said Granny in a very serious voice, and the curse at last must be confronted. But what about Archie? At this point in my account of what became of me, it is necessary for you to know that Archie is my cat, and that Granny has taken him from me before. Yes, taken. It is truly a tragic tale, but never mind about that. Provisions have been made, said Granny. What sort of provisions? The cat is in good hands, said Granny. Well, this was what Granny had said to me the last time she took Archie, and I did not like the sound of her words one bit. Also, I did not believe her. It is a dark day when you do not believe your Granny. It is a day for tears. I started to cry. I cried until we crossed over the Florida-Georgia state line, and then something about the state line woke me up. State lines can do that. Maybe you understand what I'm talking about, and maybe you don't. All I can say is that I had a sudden and irrevocableness, and I thought, I have to get out of the car. I have to go back. So I said, Granny, stop the car. And Granny said, I will do no such thing. Granny has never listened to other people's instructions. She has never heeded anyone's commands. She is the type of person who tells other people what to do, not vice versa. But in the end, it didn't matter that Granny refused to stop the car, because fate intervened. And by that I mean to say that we ran out of gas. If you have not left your home in the middle of the night without even giving it a backwards glance, if you have not left your cat and your friends, and also a one-eyed dog named Buddy, without getting to tell any of them goodbye, if you had not stood on the side of the road in Georgia, somewhere just past the irrevocable state line, and waited for someone to come along and give you a ride, well, then you cannot understand the desperation that was in my heart that day, which is exactly why I am writing all of this down, so that you will understand the desperation, the utter devastation in my heart. And also, as I said at the beginning, I am writing it down for somewhat more practical matters. And those more practical matters are so that you will know what happened to me, Louisiana Elefante. Chapter 2. This is what happened. We stood on the side of the road in Georgia, just past the Florida-Georgia state line, which is not at all in any way a line, yet people insist that it exists. Think about that. Granny turned to me and said, "All will be well." I said, "I do not believe you." I refused to look at her. We were both quiet for a very long time. 3 semis drove past us. One was painted with a picture of a cow standing in a field of green grass. I was jealous of that cow, because she was at home and I was not. It seemed like a very sad thing to be jealous of a fake cow on the side of a truck. I must warn you that a great deal of this story is extremely sad. When the 3rd semi blew past us without even slowing down, Granny said, "I am only attending to your best interests." Well, what was in my best interest was being with Ramey Clark and Beverly Topinski. Ramey and Beverly were the friends of my heart, and they had been my best friends for 2 solid years. I could not survive without them. I couldn't. It was just not possible. So what I said to Granny was, "I want to go home. Being with Archie is in my best interests. Ramey and Beverly and Buddy, the one-eyed dog, are in my best interests. You don't understand anything about my best interests." "Now is not the time," said Granny. "This conversation is opportune. I feel extremely unwell, but nonetheless I am persevering, as should you." Well, I did not care that Granny felt extremely unwell, and I was tired of persevering. I crossed my arms over my chest. I stared down at the ground. There were a lot of ants running around on the side of the highway, looking very busy and pleased with themselves. Why would ants choose to live on the side of a highway, where they were just going to get run over by cars and semis on a regular basis? Since I was not talking to Granny, there was no one in the world for me to ask this question of. It was a very lonely feeling. And then an old man in a pickup truck stopped. The old man in the pickup truck was named George Luttrell. He rolled down his window and raised his cap off his head and said, "Howdy, I am George Luttrell." I smiled at him. It is best to smile. That is what Granny has told me my whole life. If you have to choose between smiling and not smiling, choose smiling. It fools people for a short time, and it gives you an advantage, according to Granny. "Now, what are you 2 lovely ladies doing out on the side of the road?" said George Luttrell. "Good morning, George Luttrell," said Granny. "It seems we have miscalculated and run entirely out of gas." She smiled a very large smile. She used all her teeth. "Miscalculated," said George Luttrell. "Run entirely out of gasoline, my gracious!" "Could we impose upon you for a ride to the nearest gas station and back again?" said Granny. "You can impose upon me," said George Luttrell. I consider not imposing upon George Luttrell, because the truth is that in addition to being tired of persevering, I was also tired of imposing. Granny and I were always imposing on people. That is how we got by. We imposed. Also, we borrowed. Sometimes we stole. I considered not getting into the truck. I considered running down the highway back to Florida, but I did not think I would be able to run fast enough. I have never been able to run fast enough. And by that I mean that no matter where I go, Granny seems to find me. Is that fate? Destiny? The power of Granny? I don't know. I got in the truck. The inside of George Luttrell's truck smelled like tobacco and vinyl. The seat was ripped up, and the stuffing was coming out of it in places. "We certainly do appreciate this, George Luttrell," said Granny. Once somebody told Granny what their name was, she never lost a chance to use it. She said that people like to hear the sound of their own names above and beyond any other sound in the world. She said it was a scientifically proven fact. I doubted it very sincerely. I sat in George Luttrell's truck and picked at the stuffing coming out of the seat, and then I threw the little pieces of stuffing fluff out the window. "Stop that, Louisiana," said Granny, but I didn't stop. I threw pieces of truck stuffing out the window, and I thought about the people and animals I had left behind. Raymie Clark, who loved to read and who listened to all of my stories, Beverly Topinski, who was afraid of nothing and who was very good at picking locks. And then there was Archie, who was king of the cats, and Buddy, the one-eyed dog, who was also known to us as the dog of our hearts. What if I never got the chance to use those names again? What if I was destined to never again stand in front of those people, and that cat and that dog, and say their names out loud to them? It was a tragic thought. I threw more stuffing from George Luttrell's truck window. The stuffing looked like snow flying through the air. If you squinted, it did. If you squinted really hard. I am good at squinting. George Luttrell took us to a gas station called Vic's Value. Granny started the work of talking Mr. Luttrell into pumping some gas into a can for her, and also making him pay for what he pumped. And then I had no desire to witness her efforts to get the gas that would only take me farther from my home and friends. I walked away from the two of them and went inside Vic's Value, where it smelled like motor oil and dirt. There was a tall counter with a cash register on it. Next to the cash register, there was a rack that was full of bags of salted peanuts. And even though my heart was broken and I was filled with the most terrible despair, my goodness, I was hungry. I stared very hard at those little bags of peanuts. The man behind the counter was sitting on a chair that had wheels, and when he saw me, he came out from behind the counter like a spider, moving his feet back and forth and back and forth. The chair made a squeaky, exasperated noise as it rolled toward me. "How do you do?" I said. I smiled, using all of my teeth. "My Granny is outside getting some gas." The man turned his head and looked at Granny and George Luttrell, and then he looked back at me. "Yep," he said. I considered him. He had a lot of hair in his nose. "How much are your peanuts?" I said. I said this even though I did not have any money at all. Granny always said, "Ask the price exactly as if you intend to pay." The man didn't answer me. "Are you Vic?" I said. "Could be." "I'm Louisiana Elefante." "Yup," he said. He took a yellow spotted handkerchief out of his pocket and wiped it across his forehead. His hands were almost entirely black with grease. I said, "I have been made to leave home against my will." "That right there is the story of the whole world," said Vic. "Is it?" I said. "Yup." "I hate it," I said. "I have friends at home." Vic nodded. He folded his spotted handkerchief up into a neat square and put it back in his pocket. "You can take as many of them little bags of peanuts as you want to," he said, nodded in the direction of the peanut rack. "Free of charge," he said, and then he rolled himself back around the counter. Well, this was the only good thing that happened to me since Granny woke me up at 3 a.m. and told me that the day of reckoning had arrived. In some ways, this is a story of woe and confusion, but it is also a story of joy and kindness and free peanuts. "Thank you," I said. I helped myself to 14 bags. Vic smiled at me the whole time I was taking the peanuts from the rack. There is goodness in my heart, in many hearts, in most hearts, in some hearts. I love peanuts. And that is the end of the first 2 chapters of Louisiana's Way Home. We have this available at the Warminster Library, so you can check out this book if you want to learn more about Louisiana and her adventure with her granny. If you guys liked this story, or you get a chance to read and you are looking for some other stories, so this one is a historical fiction. And there are other historical fictions that you might enjoy. If you enjoy like the road trip aspect, there is Counting to Perfect by Suzanne M. Lefleur, in which a girl named Cassie foregoes her summer plans to join her older sister and her niece on a road trip. So that might be a good one. Another story that might be of interest to you guys is Shouting at the Rain by Linda Mullally Hunt. And it features a girl named Delcy who lives with her grandmother and misses the regular family after her friends like outgrow her. So again, it has that kind of theme of like living with your grandmother and things like that. So those are some two good ones. I would say that a good read alike for this that I personally would say is Rain Rain. That's a really great start. I think the author is Martin. Don't quote me on that, but that's just off of memory. So Rain Rain might be a good one. It's about a young girl and her relationship with her dog, and the girl happens to be autistic. So it's about her relationship with like her father, but also about her dog named Rain. So that would be another good read alike for a book like this. And as always, you can pick up other Kate DiCamillo books that you might end up enjoying as well if you end up liking this story if you end up reading the whole thing. Okay, guys. So we're done with our Monday book tasting. We'll be back next week with another story that we'll be reading. So we'll be doing it every week on Mondays. There we go. On a Monday at 1 o'clock. So we hope that you guys will tune in for these Monday book tastings and get a sampling of a variety of books that were published in 2019 and 2020, or came into our collection in 2019 and 2020. All right, you guys, we are done for today. We hope that you guys enjoyed this, and we hope to see you very soon at the Warminster Township Free Library.